Eternights is a game that pretty much came out of nowhere. The game was announced at a Sony State of Play sometime last year, and it immediately came on my radar. But how is this game, now that I got a chance to play the entire thing? Is this a game that's worth playing? In this review, we're going to take a look at the game as a whole and answer these questions. This will be a non-spoiler review of the game with a spoiler review later on, so you don't have to worry about having anything in the game ruined for you. And so, we dive into Eternights to answer the question, is this worth playing? So here are some obligatory disclaimers. While the company did allow me access to the game, my thoughts and opinions are my own and they are not sponsoring this review. The developers market this game as being influenced by Persona, and when I reached out to the developer about the influences, they were able to specify that Persona 3 had the most influence in the game. And you can clearly see the influences in how Eternights has a dating sim aspect to it, similar to those of the Persona games, with their social links and their themes of the game. Though it's not as in-depth as the social links in the Persona games, I think it works better for how this game is built. Where the Persona games are much heavier on character interactions, requiring you to balance your decisions throughout the day, Eternights seems to be less about keeping a schedule, and in return, less punishing for not having everything organized. But your choices and dialogue do make a difference with your characters as you build a relationship with them. The social aspect is easier to work around as there is much less characters to interact with than in a Persona game. With the setting of the world, what it is, it makes sense that you're limited to only interacting with 5 different characters. Outside of the character's best friend Chani, you can build a romantic relationship with any of the other characters through this social gameplay. Much like Persona, you can build your relationships by going out with characters during the day, and then at night you can train with them, which will bring up your affinity with each character. Each character has different ranks that increase as you build bonds with them. Chani only has 5 ranks as he is not a romantic option. The other 4 characters, Yuna, Min, Sia, and Johan, all have a total of 7 ranks. Building these ranks also unlocks different stat bonuses and abilities that aid you in combat. Reaching rank 7 with a character will also unlock their ultimate skill. How far you progress with these relationships also depends on your personal social stat. You have 4 different social stats that will increase from your dialogue choices or from training them specifically with Chani. Each character's relationship tree will be locked behind your social stats, so making sure you have them maxed out will give you the best opportunity to increase your relationships with the characters. Besides bonding with your characters, you need a specific item to unlock the different skills and upgrades that the characters provide. This item is called White Essence, and in order to get the White Essence, you need to do tasks at night with the characters by collecting items that they are requesting. These items can be found in either a convenience store, warehouse, or library, and you'll be doing this a lot. So making sure you remember where the items are will help you from wasting time. Your own skills can be unlocked by using an item called Black Essence. This can be found in dungeons or from killing certain enemies in the game. But don't worry about these too much as you will have an abundance by the time you reach the end of the game. And while the Persona influences are clearly felt, they don't seem to drive the game, so it doesn't seem like I'm playing a Persona clone. And again, this plays to its strength. As much as I love Persona games, and am an avid collector of Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, the Persona games seem to have the same problem. They all have bad pacing in the beginning of the games. Persona 5 does it a bit better than 3 and 4, but the long periods of exposition between exploration and combat slows the pacing down to a crawl. Eternights doesn't seem to have this problem, though it did make me think it was going to with how it began. But the action and story quickly ramps up within the first 10 minutes of playing this, and the way the pacing seems to be done works very well. Going from exposition to exploration and action flows well enough where I never felt bored like moments in Persona games, where they try to cram an hour's worth of exposition between other moments. Instead, the flow of this game seems to go with 5 minutes of exposition to 20 minutes of exploration and combat to a cutscene and back to exposition and repeat. Combat is also fast-paced as it's an action RPG instead of a turn-based RPG like its influences. And with it being action based, you have different abilities that are mapped to different buttons. You have a basic attack, heavy attack, and special abilities that you can perform once you meet those criteria, such as a combo finisher, death blow, and more. There's also a dodge button, and if you time it right, you can perform a perfect dodge which slows down time and speeds up your attack. Periodically, you will encounter enemies with barriers. These barriers can be broken down by using what's called the elemental fist. Depending on the enemy's barrier, you must use the opposite element to break its barrier. Using the wrong elemental fist will make you have to charge it all over again. This is also where building bonds with your characters comes into play. Again, as they get stronger elemental attacks to help break those barriers faster. Overall, the combat is flashy, fast, and I love it. Even though there were so many familiar things to this game, it was so unfamiliar that it left me stunned and wanting more. I even reached out to my contact asking for more because what I had just played, I was absolutely blown away by it. And I haven't even spoken about the aesthetics of the game, which are beautiful by the way. The only issue I have with the visual presentation is that the character design seems a little bland. And those who are familiar with Shin Megami Tensei will understand this example, but it reminds me of how the characters were designed in Devil Survivor on the DS, where those characters were a little bland in design, but it didn't matter because the game itself was phenomenal. And this definitely applies here. Among all this though, is something that stood out to me more than anything else. Because while the game may be influenced by Persona, it does have something that Persona doesn't really have much of, and that is horror elements. The game is heavy on horror elements and themes, and it is not afraid to show you that from the very beginning. To where the main character has a horrific dream where he gets his arm cut off, and then it actually happens. And when these moments come, they surprise me, as I would never have guessed that this was going to be playing out like this. Eventually, I started noticing other things that began to remind me more of games like Silent Hill and Parasite Eve, and I welcomed it with open arms. The enemies in the game are humans who have transformed into these misshapen creatures that are out for blood. The body horror is heavy in this game, from some of these people having grown a second head or face to others having extra arms or even multiple bodies in one body. There was one encounter where I noticed it had two people fused together with a predominant female figure in the middle as she had her arms wrapped around her breasts. Again, this was not something I was expecting to see in this type of game. The game was not afraid to lay into this horror too, as one moment you're sneaking past enemies and the next you're running for your life in an intense chase scene with an enemy of a human that had been transformed into what looked like blades. You can't kill it, you can't sneak past it. Only run frantically down a long hallway while trying to avoid the obstacles in your way and praying you don't take a wrong turn. It was these moments that made it less Persona and more Evil Within, and I loved every minute of this. Though as you progress and get stronger, you no longer have to do things like this, except for one other moment, but that is spoiler territory and we won't go there. And while the game does have a time limit like Persona games do, there is plenty of time to be able to build your relationships and continue with the story. But also not to worry if you do go past a due date, as the game will give you a game over scene and then put you 2 days back on the calendar to allow you to progress properly. This game is not a long game, but I think that's to its benefit. Clocking in around 10 to 15 hours to finish the story, it gives you the opportunity to replay the game over and over. And while at the time of me playing the game there was no New Game Plus option, it has since been added after I reached out to the developers asking if there was something they were planning on implementing. Replaying the game allows you to build those relationships faster, which allows you to explore more of the game. And with replayability being an important factor to me, this is a big bonus. While the Persona games have New Game Plus options, it is difficult for me to play those games more than twice with how long they are. The downsides I honestly have to Eternights is that I do wish there was a couple more characters to interact with. And I know I said before that I understand for story reasons there aren't more characters, but I really think that having a couple more characters would have livened up the game even more. I also feel like the game would benefit with allowing us to play as the other characters with different combat styles, as the other characters who join you in battle don't really do much of anything until you give them a command, because they do not attack on their own. I do also have one more complaint, but that's getting into spoilers and story, so if you want to see that complaint, well, you're gonna have to wait for my spoiler review. And so to answer the question, is this game worth playing? Absolutely. With the game not being a long game to play and having replayability with the New Game Plus and different difficulty options, you definitely get your money's worth at a price point of $30 US. If you're a Persona fan, then this game is right up your alley. If you've always been curious as to what Persona is, but never really got into turn-based RPGs, then this one is for you as well, as it plays more like a hack and slash. And if you do play this game, let me know in the comments if you asked the girl in the beginning if you can call her mommy or not, because I asked if I can call her mommy and she never responded. So I'm still waiting on that. Until next time, happy gaming.
Go get him, Coach!